At exactly 8:15 on the morning of Tuesday, May 12th, 2026, the mood inside the newsroom on London Bridge Street changed instantly. What had begun as an ordinary morning filled with coffee cups and quiet conversations suddenly fell into complete silence. Arthur Edwards, the legendary royal photographer who spent 5 decades documenting the House of Windsor through the lens of his camera, did not walk in carrying his iconic Canon equipment that day. Instead, he arrived holding a worn gray Dossier sealed shut with a faded red adhesive strip untouched for almost 10 years. This was no ordinary tabloid revelation. What unfolded was a full forensic breakdown of a professional relationship that had finally shattered beyond repair. But before we open the contents of that gray file, you need to understand just how serious this situation has become. If you appreciate investigative reporting that digs deeper than the palace headlines, make sure you subscribe now and activate all notifications. The story developing today is moving faster than the royal institution can contain. Arthur Edwards made his way straight to the 4th floor, entering room 402, the Sun newspaper's secure internal briefing chamber. Sitting across from the editor-in-chief, he carefully placed a single sheet of paper onto the polished mahogany table. It was a non-disclosure agreement signed on May 28th, 2018. But today, one critical detail had changed. Hidden deep inside paragraph 12 subsection 4 was a legal expiration clause that officially activated at midnight. Leaning forward, the veteran photographer spoke in a low, gravelly tone, his words quietly captured by the room's internal recording system. He admitted that for the past 8 years, he had effectively become a prisoner of silence. Then he described a disturbing incident from June 2018, only weeks after the royal wedding. According to Edwards, he had been called into a private dressing room where Meghan Markle allegedly confronted him directly with what he described as a cold and calculated ultimatum. He claimed she told him very clearly that under no circumstances was he ever to photograph the left side of her face during public appearances. In a near whisper, she allegedly explained that she knew exactly which camera angles generated the highest value in the American market and refused to let a British photographer compromise her personal brand with artistic decisions she did not approve of. These claims surfaced during what many insiders are calling a full-scale crisis for the Sussex operation. Just 30 days ago, Netflix officially pulled the plug on Out With Love, Meghan, the lifestyle series expected to redefine their media empire. Instead, the project collapsed almost immediately after debuting, failing even to enter the top 100 streamed programs. Within the entertainment industry, this level of failure is often described as hitting the ratings basement. Now, with their commercial protections severely weakened, the Sussexes are exposed to the one thing they have allegedly worked hardest to avoid: testimony from the people who were physically present behind the scenes. If this dramatic shift in the story surprises you, comment the word of truth below so we know you are tracking this investigation with us. But the dossier Edwards revealed inside room 402 goes far beyond personal stories and backstage memory. Included in the documents are official communications connected directly to the Lord Chamberlain's office, the most senior department within the royal household. According to these records, palace officials were allegedly forced as early as 2019 to intervene in escalating tensions between the Duchess and the veteran British press corps over what insiders described aggressive image control tactics. One internal memo, stamped at precisely 10:45 a.m. on July 4th, 2019, outlines a shocking 3-step system allegedly pushed by Meghan's team. Step 1 involved confiscating photographers' memory cards so images could be screened first by her private PR staff. Step 2 demanded the blacklisting of any media agency that captured facial expressions or candid moments deemed unauthorized. Step 3 proposed a permanent removal from the royal press pool for photographers unwilling to sign an additional confidential NDA. Arthur Edwards reportedly looked directly at the editorial board and declared that this situation was never truly about protecting privacy. In his words, it was always about controlling and manufacturing a highly profitable commercial image. He also recalled Prince Harry standing silently in the background during many of these confrontations, eyes fixed downward, appearing like a man who had emotionally lost his voice. But perhaps the most explosive development from this morning's briefing is the countdown now underway. At exactly 9:00 a.m. today, Edwards confirmed that a formal 48-hour ultimatum had been issued. He revealed the existence of a collection of digital recordings now being referred to internally as the Frogmore Tapes. These audio files were allegedly recorded during the tense and chaotic renovation period at Frogmore Cottage in 2019. Sources claim the recordings contain raw, uncensored reactions from the Duchess regarding royal staff assigned by the Crown. The clock is now ticking. If the Sussex legal team fails to deliver a verified response to accusations of organized media manipulation before Thursday morning, those recordings are reportedly set for public release. What we may be witnessing right now is the complete unraveling of a carefully engineered public image that took over a decade to build. Stay with us. Show your support for independent royal journalism by liking this video, and stay with us as we continue counting down the next 48 hours of what may become one of the most explosive royal media events in recent history. The Grey Dossier has now been fully opened, and insiders say the material inside is even more damaging than originally feared. To truly grasp the magnitude of the file placed on the table in room 402 this morning, we have to retrace the 10-year sequence of events that transformed Arthur Edwards from Meghan Markle's strongest public supporter into perhaps her most methodical and relentless critic. This is more than a simple timeline of public appearances and headlines. It is a detailed reconstruction of how a once professional alliance slowly unraveled under the pressure of worldwide attention and internal distrust. The story begins on November 27th, 2017, inside the sunken garden at Kensington Palace. The world watched as a prince deeply in love introduced an American actress poised to modernize the monarchy. Arthur Edwards stood only feet away from the couple that day, and he was among the very first royal insiders to publicly embrace Meghan. Speaking to international media, he described her as a rock star, convinced she represented the energy and transformation the royal family desperately needed. At that stage, public opinion in Britain was overwhelmingly behind her, fueled in large part by Edward's own enthusiasm and credibility. But behind the scenes, the honeymoon phase faded far faster than anyone expected. The first major crack appeared on May 19, 2018, during the royal wedding at Windsor Castle. For most photographers, covering a royal wedding is the defining moment of an entire career. Yet for Arthur Edwards, that morning became the beginning of a professional fracture. Despite his status as one of Britain's most respected royal photographers, he was reportedly positioned nearly 50 meters away from the main carriage route, a distance almost unheard of for someone with his seniority. Later, he admitted to colleagues that as the carriage approached, both Meghan and Harry turned their faces toward the opposite side simultaneously. To Arthur Edwards, the broadcast represented far more than a carefully planned prince. He believed it was a complete scorched earth operation against the monarchy itself. Watching closely through the eyes of someone who had spent decades observing genuine royal emotion, Edwards delivered a verdict that stunned many longtime palace observers. In his view, the entire performance felt staged. He said that Prince Harry, he had known since 1984, the smiling, resilient soldier admired by the public, had disappeared entirely, replaced by someone who looked deeply unhappy and emotionally defeated. Then came December 15th, 2022, with the release of the Netflix documentary series. It was Arthur Edwards who identified what critics later called the fatal inconsistency in the Sussex narrative. One dramatic clip in the trailer appeared to show photographers aggressively pursuing the couple. That Edwards recognized the footage immediately. It had actually been filmed years earlier during a Harry Potter premiere back in 2011, long before Meghan had even entered Harry's life. For Edwards, this discovery became undeniable proof of narrative manipulation. To him, it was the smoking gun. Now, on the morning of May 12th, 2026, as that grey dossier remains open inside a secure room in London, one realization is becoming impossible to ignore. Arthur Edwards was not merely documenting royal history through photographs over the past decade. He was preserving evidence, collecting receipts, building a chronological archive that has now evolved from speculation into a fully constructed narrative backed by dates, documents, and recorded memories. And yet the most disturbing question still remains unanswered. The question reportedly sending waves of panic through Sussex legal circles right now. What exactly exists inside the unreleased Frogmore recordings? What was allegedly said behind the closed doors and private hallways of Frogmore Cottage that required years of silence and legal containment? The countdown toward the 48-hour deadline continues. But to fully understand the significance of the Grey Dossier, delivered this morning by Arthur Edwards, we need to move beyond the headlines and examine the system operating underneath it. Within British investigative media circles, insiders allegedly refer to this framework as Operation Victim Hero, a calculated 4-stage public relations cycle designed to transform private tensions into international commercial value. After observing the royal family for more than 50 years, Arthur Edwards may not have simply been taking photographs. He may have been quietly documenting a strategic blueprint for narrative control, unlike anything previously witnessed in modern royal history. And according to the dossier, the mechanism always begins with a trigger. The strategy, according to the dossier, always depended on creating an information vacuum. Whether the issue involved the birth of baby Archie or the expensive renovations carried out at Frogmore Cottage, the first move allegedly remained the same, completely shutting out the traditional press. By excluding experienced royal journalists like Arthur Edwards, an empty space was intentionally created, and in the non-stop world of 24-hour media, an empty space never stays empty. It quickly fills with speculation, rumors, and public curiosity. According to Edwards, that was precisely the objective. The moment British reporters started raising legitimate concerns about transparency, taxpayer funding, or royal accountability, the mechanism had already been activated. From there, the strategy allegedly entered what Edwards described as the escalation phase. The Grey Dossier outlines a repeated pattern where any scrutiny directed toward the couple's decisions was immediately reframed into something much larger and emotionally explosive. What Arthur Edwards allegedly assembled is described as an authority staircase, a 3-level framework of financial evidence that could potentially transform a long-running public controversy into something with legal implications. In this phase of the investigation, Edwards reportedly shifts away from the role of photographer and enters territory far closer to forensic auditing. At the center of this financial analysis is the £2. £4 million renovation project tied to Frogmore Cottage, a subject that has frustrated British taxpayers for years. The first layer of the authority staircase focuses on documentation. Edwards allegedly obtained copies of internal invoices connected to the Crown Estate, the organization responsible for managing royal property and land holdings. These were not broad summaries or public reports. According to sources, they included highly detailed, itemized expense breakdowns dating from late 2018 through early 2019. One invoice in particular, timestamped at 2:45 p.m. 2019, reportedly showed an extraordinary budget allocation for imported custom fixtures sourced from North America. Edwards argues these items appeared inconsistent with what would normally be expected for a permanent British royal residence. The second level centers on institutional tension. The dossier references a chain of communications involving the Windsor and Maidenhead borough accounts. These records allegedly suggest that some of the planning requests connected to Frogmore Cottage resembled specifications more commonly associated with a luxury production facility rather than a traditional long-term family home. Edwards highlights one planning department meeting note where officials reportedly raised concerns regarding several unusual structural and layout modifications requested on behalf of the Sussexes. According to the institutional trail outlined in the dossier, the public may have been told that Frogmore Cottage was being renovated into a family residence, but the documentation behind the scenes appeared to tell an entirely different story. And that brings us to the third, and potentially most damaging, level of the investigation: the legal structure surrounding the sovereign grant. Within the British constitutional system, the sovereign grant represents the annual funding allocated to the monarchy for official duties, largely through taxpayer money. Arthur Edwards now claims to possess evidence pointing toward what he describes as a carefully planned exit strategy from the very beginning. According to the timeline presented in the dossier, Meghan Markle allegedly never intended to remain at Frogmore Cottage for more than a few months. The file reportedly contains logistical records showing that while renovations in Windsor were still being finalized, shipping arrangements connected to a North American relocation were already underway. Edwards characterizes this in stark terms inside the dossier, describing it as the use of public funds to construct a highly marketable royal domestic image designed to elevate personal brand value on a global scale, only for the property itself to be abandoned once that commercial value had peaked. The theory outlined in the report is both simple and unsettling. Use the symbolism of a royal forever home to strengthen international public appeal, then pivot away from the institution once the brand expansion is complete. And according to Edwards, the financial shadow of Frogmore Cottage still has not disappeared. Although public statements years ago claimed the renovation money had been fully repaid, the dossier allegedly identifies major accounting inconsistencies. Based on Edwards' review of the 2025 Crown Estate audit, he claims there remains a discrepancy worth several £100,000 when maintenance expenses, accrued interest, and unused security infrastructure are fully factored into the equation. During this morning's briefing, Edwards reportedly argued that the public had only been shown a heavily sanitized version of the repayment process. More significantly, he alleges that the funds used to reimburse taxpayers were generated through commercial partnerships and media deals, activities traditionally restricted within the framework of royal duty. That accusation creates what Edwards describes as a circular legal dilemma. If royal status was commercially monetized in order to repay money originally spent under royal privilege, can the debt truly be considered resolved? The dossier leaves the Sussex legal team facing one final and deeply uncomfortable question ahead: the 48-hour deadline. If Frogmore Cottage was genuinely intended to become a permanent family residence, why do Edwards' records allegedly show that a private American interior designer had already been contracted for a California property nearly 3 months before the Windsor renovations were even completed? At this point, the paper trail is no longer subtle. It has become impossible to ignore. Public memory of January 25 is dominated by a single polished image: Meghan Markle standing inside a sunlit Montecito kitchen, laughing naturally beside longtime friend and makeup artist Daniel Martin. The Netflix-style series With Love, Meghan was promoted as a warm return to authenticity and domestic calm. One carefully staged sequence, filmed in the south-facing kitchen at precisely 2:15 in the afternoon, showed the Duchess delicately pouring organic honey into small white bowls, while Martin laughed casually beside her. Everything about the moment was designed to radiate comfort. Sunlight washing across marble counters, soft focus cinematography, friendship, warmth, and effortless California elegance. But according to the grey dossier revealed in London this morning, the reality behind that moment allegedly changed just 2 minutes later. Arthur Edwards reportedly obtained a collection of high-resolution behind-the-scenes photographs along with synchronized audio recordings, documenting what happened immediately after the director called a cut at exactly 17 p.m. The shift, according to the dossier, was immediate and startling. Sources claim that as soon as filming stopped and the production lights dimmed, the relaxed atmosphere inside the kitchen vanished entirely. The recordings allegedly capture Meghan sharply reprimanding a junior production assistant over the placement of the honey jars used in the shot. Edwards describes a scene where tension escalated over details as minor as the texture of the honey and a small shadow cast across one of the white bowls. A shadow the Duchess reportedly believed interfered with the camera profile angle. What makes this revelation more significant is that Edwards allegedly did not uncover this information alone. According to the dossier, he has spent months quietly coordinating with former production staff connected to the Montecito filming operation. While viewers around the world were presented with a carefully crafted image of warmth, friendship, and calm domestic life, crew members allegedly experienced a production environment defined by anxiety and constant pressure. Edwards further claims that Daniel Martin's laughter during the now famous kitchen sequence was not spontaneous joy at all, but an attempt to ease tension that had reportedly been building since the crew arrived for filming at 6:00 that morning. And this is the point where the narrative allegedly moves beyond tabloid controversy and enters potentially dangerous legal territory. At the third tier of what Edwards calls the authority staircase, the dossier points directly toward the California labor court system. According to the file, 3 former members of the 2020 production crew have now filed a joint legal complaint against the Sussex production company. The lawsuit reportedly goes beyond financial compensation, accusing the workplace environment of being deeply toxic and psychologically damaging. Allegations that closely resemble claims once raised by former palace aides years earlier in the United Kingdom. Most critically of all, the plaintiffs are reportedly using evidence gathered by Arthur Edwards as a central component of their legal argument. For the first time, the accusations originating from London and the events alleged to have taken place in California are no longer separate narratives. According to the dossier, they have officially converged into a single, coordinated controversy. According to sources connected to the Los Angeles legal filings, attorneys are now using the Edwards dossier to establish what they describe as a continuous 10-year behavioral pattern, a chain of evidence linking distressed palace aides at Kensington in 2018 to allegedly traumatized production. Assistance in Montecito by 2025. During the briefing earlier today, Arthur Edwards reportedly told the editorial board that the so-called Iwuni incident represented the final breaking point for him personally. He explained that while reviewing the footage from the Lifestyle series, he immediately recognized the subtle collapse of Meghan's smile the instant filming stopped. A fleeting facial expression he claims to have spent 5 decades learning to identify while documenting the royal family. According to Edwards, he looked directly at his editors and said, "You can't perform kindness for a camera if you can't sustain it behind the scenes with your own staff." Now, as reports of the California Labor Court complaint spread across international media networks this morning, the Sussexes appear to be cornered between 2 entirely separate legal systems operating on opposite sides of the Atlantic. The deadline attached to Edwards' ultimatum has now fallen below the 40-hour mark. And according to the dossier, if the allegations surrounding the honey incident are publicly denied, Edwards is allegedly prepared to release the complete unedited 17-minute audio recording captured during the kitchen confrontation at 2:17 p.m. For many observers, An unsettling question is beginning to take shape. How many moments presented to the public as authentic were, in reality, carefully choreographed performances constructed for the camera? At this stage, the image management operation described in the dossier is no longer merely cracking under pressure. According to Edward's supporters, it is being methodically dismantled by the very photographer who witnessed the rise of the Sussex narrative from the beginning. As evening falls on Tuesday, May 12, 2026, legal advisors in Montecito are almost certainly working through the night. The 48-hour countdown, initiated by Edwards, continues to shrink. The dossier allegedly argues that the systematic commercial exploitation of royal status through projects like the Netflix contracts and associated production ventures may provide sufficient grounds for formal parliamentary action concerning the Sussex titles. Analysts connected to the briefing reportedly believe there is now a serious possibility that by the end of 2026, the title Duchess of Sussex could face formal review inside the House of Commons. Arthur Edwards claims the documentation he assembled demonstrates that the Sandringham Agreement, the arrangement designed to prevent the monarchy from being commercially monetized, may have been breached as early as 2019. If proven, the implications would move far beyond celebrity controversy and directly into constitutional territory. According to supporters of the dossier, this represents the collision point between Hollywood branding and the rigid framework of the British constitutional system itself. But even now, with the release of the alleged Frogmore recordings only hours away, there remains one final detail inside the Edwards dossier that almost every media outlet has overlooked. On the very last page reportedly sits a single grainy photograph taken during Queen Elizabeth II funeral procession in September 2022. The image shows Prince Harry standing only feet from Prince William. Arthur Edwards was positioned inside the Abbey that day, and according to his account, he captured something far more significant than a photograph. He claims he witnessed a private 3-second exchange between the brothers. A moment so brief that almost nobody else noticed it. Edwards alleges that Harry leaned slightly toward William and quietly whispered 4 words into his ear. According to the photographer, those words were neither a farewell nor a greeting. He believes they were a confession, one that may explain every strategic move the royal household has allegedly made throughout the spring of 2026. Edwards claims Prince William's reaction was immediate and chilling. After hearing the words, he reportedly stared straight ahead for the remainder of the funeral service without blinking once. So what exactly did Harry whisper to the future king? And why has that moment remained buried until now? The answer, according to the dossier, exists somewhere inside the unreleased audio logs scheduled to surface this Thursday. If you want to be there when the seal on the Frogmore tapes is finally broken, now is the time to act. Subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss the next development. Like this video to become part of the worldwide discussion, and tell us below what you believe Harry said to William during those 3 seconds at Westminster Abbey. Was it a cry for help? Nah. Countdown has now dropped below 36 hours. Stay tuned, because the truth is no longer hiding in the shadows.